If I can say hi to everyone, I am Steve Clemens. I am the CEO of Widehall. I'm also editor-at-large of the National Interest. I'm so pleased today to invite you to a program that's hosted and organized by AARP, my dear friend Nancy LeaMond and her team. We're going to have an outstanding discussion here. This is like salon size, so we can go to all of you too. We're going to be discussing really my favorite topic, and I want to say Nancy LeaMond and her team and I have been discussing this topic for many years now, and we're getting closer, I think, to the political system in this town realizing that they've been neglecting, demeaning, overlooking the most important voter in America, who is the woman over 50. A lot of you young people, put your hand up if you think you're young. You guys lie. You say you're going to vote and you don't vote. Rex, you know that, right? You say you're going to. Do you actually vote? No. You love to vote, sure. You love, but I do find you're gonna Debbie Dingell's gonna have to talk with you. But I do think what's really interesting to me is you kind of look at the stress points in America's economic system, political system, the way the social equation is supposed to work. Women over 50, which we're going to get into in a moment, carry an extraordinary amount of that burden and responsibility, and it doesn't get discussed enough, which is why we're doing these coffee house chats. And we've got an extraordinary group of people. We've got a lineup of people who are legislators and work in the policy space. I like to have discussions with all of you as we're doing this. We also have my very good friend, Kristen Soltis Anderson, who's founding partner of Echelon Insights, which really doesn't describe very much about her. She wrote one of my favorite books, was called The Selfie Voter. Is it selfie vote or voter? Selfie, whichever one, it's close enough. But basically was looking at a new generation of participants, then a new generation. Now you've got to update that book, by the way, Kristen. But Kristen is one of the most, I think, well-renowned, deservedly renowned pollsters, sort of constantly looking at these shifts. We're going to be talking about a report that's an ongoing, evolving report called She's the Difference. And so I've given you more than I intended to, but I want to ask Nancy LeaMond, who is the Chief Advocacy and Engagement Officer at AARP, to say a few words before we get going. I'm going to ask Kristen to come up here, and then I'm going to introduce the great Debbie Dingell. In introducing Nancy LeaMond, who's the diva of these issues, which is a compliment in my book at AARP, she also coined the term that I think is both chilling and yet real, which is, she said to me one year, we were having a bunch of mayors. We had mayors from all around the country, and we're looking at what these mayors were doing. Remember that? That was a great program. And we had mayors all talking about how they were interacting and engaging elder populations in their communities. And Nancy, at this roundtable we did, says, let's just all face it, the future of retirement is work. So with that, Nancy LeaMond, and thank you for hosting us.
Well, thank you. Does this work? Can you hear me? Thank you all for coming. I have to say, I was on a call earlier today with a number of very young people. And I said, we're doing this event tonight. We're doing it as a pop-up at Compass Coffee. And each of them said, that's so cool for AARP. And they said it 5 times in a row. So I realized how uncool most people probably think we are. But we're very grateful to Steve, Kristen, and Congresswoman Dingell. I'm so used to calling you Debbie. I have to be very formal. But thank you all for being here. I'm not going to talk very long because we want to have a real conversation about a topic that is really important, and it's one that we're devoted to as we move, particularly through this election cycle. It doesn't surprise you that AARP cares a lot about the older voter, but we've spent a lot of time and energy over the last few years really trying to understand better older women and older women voters. And it's a very important constituency. They're going to vote. There's no question about that. They're going to vote, and they're going to really assess where candidates stand. And we want to hear from Kristen and others about how we should approach it and how we should think about it. So with that, first of all, just thank you for coming, thank you for being here, and over to Steve.
Great, we've got Kristen here, but I'm going to go ahead and bring Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Of course, she's a representative from Michigan. She is has been around every major stress point economically and politically I know, and you're still standing. So and I tell you, I'm not interested in survivors as much as I am prevailers, and you've been prevailing for a long time. But just before we get going, so Debbie Dingell, let's give a big round of applause for Debbie Dingell for joining us. But Kristen, I wonder if we might just start, and in the She's the Difference survey, could you give us a kind of top line, I mean, you're going to be engaged in this conversation throughout, but a top line rundown of, let me just go for the bottom line most disturbing things that we should all wake up to.
Ooh, where to begin? In this data, we see that there are
I'm going to move these
a
over
lot
here for more of our people who want seats. So.
There's a lot of economic anxiety that women 50 plus are feeling. And it's not just in the short term. Like, we know that cost of living is a massive issue. It's the question on everybody's minds. We know it's going to be the decisive issue in the midterm election. But for women 50 plus, it's not just a matter of, is it difficult for me to afford groceries or housing, et cetera. It's also a question of long-term economic security. Am I able to save for retirement? Do I think I'm going to have the retirement that I am expecting? Those sorts of questions. And we actually see this most acutely with women aged 50 to 64. For women who are 65
has that gotten worse?
So some of these questions are the first time we were asking them, but I suspect that right now, this economic anxiety we're feeling, I think we would have seen it in surveys in the past. We've seen it in different ways. I think right now it's that pairing of the long-term and the short-term economic anxiety. And what's really sticks out is women in the 50 to 64 range, because they don't have Social Security to rely on, because they don't have Medicare. And so for them, things like healthcare expenses are really big. So that to me is the thing that was a big wake-up call, was especially those women in that 50 to 64 range are really feeling a lot of economic pressures.
And the other, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to emphasize, you can continue to go down the list of bottom line.
For me, that's the biggest one.
And again, before I jump to Debbie, another thing that really struck me about the report, I've read the report, all of you can have access to it, is the number of women, I think it's 4 in 10, maybe I'm wrong, that are unpaid caregivers, the central caregivers, in addition to everything else they're doing to keep the equation working, they carry the burden of care. Honestly, it's super sad how it's written to me. Not only are they the principal caregiver for someone, but they don't expect someone to be a principal caregiver for them when they need them. So can you go into that just for a moment, Nancy?
Well, that's absolutely right. And about half of women over the age of 50 are single, widowed, never married. And so they may be caring for a loved one, but they're very worried about who's going to care for them.
I actually got it wrong. I think it's 5 or 6 in 10 that are caregivers.
Yeah.
It's 4 in 10 that have a have an adult child that they're taking care of or supporting, right? So
yeah, it's just, the numbers are phenomenal, and family caregivers are the backbone of our long-term care system in this country. There is no question that families have to struggle there. Even if you have home care workers, you yourself are going to be spending a lot of time caring for someone. And it has obviously economic impact on the family, but also with employers. We probably get as many phone calls these days from employers as we do from actual caregivers. Employers saying, this is one of the biggest issues I'm hearing about. There's pressure on me to provide paid leave, to provide more flexibility in the workplace. It is a huge economic issue.
And it's not just about a sort of narrow slice of women. I mean, over half of the women in our survey either are currently a caregiver of some kind or have been in the not too distant past. And so it's very widespread condition that people find themselves in.
Representative Dingell, and I have permission to say Debbie, there's a kind of cliche, I don't know if we call it cliche, but there's a kind of jadedness when it comes to talking about economic, I'm just going to be honest. Everybody talks about economic inequality and it kind of goes right over people's heads or through their ear. But, you've been working in your work on the economic stress points, of industry, of, the social support equation, how to make this work. And I'm just interested in starting out with the question is it worse now from your perspective in the many years you've been working on these issues? And how, when I tell everybody, try to put yourself in the shoes of women over 50 and how they're looking at their moment. What are they seeing?
I think there's a caregiving crisis in this country. 4 in 10 women right now, if they had an emergency, would not have $400 in their savings account to be able to cover that emergency. um, 8 out of 10 women are counting on Social Security to be one of the legs of their retirement stool. 30% at least, it's the only source of income for their retirement. And I'll talk to you as someone, people would look at me, and Nancy knows this. I feel it very personally, that, you look, oh, she knows so many people, everything's great. You don't know how scared you are if you're a single woman. And I'm not old, I'm seasoned. Seasoned. About who will take care of me, who will, like if something happens to me, who makes a decision? Who do I call? I actually said this to somebody last week, and they said, well, at least you can call your chief. So Meg, you didn't know that. But, oh, I know, it was a plea. Somebody had threatened to kill me. I shouldn't say it that way. And they were like, I know, I shouldn't have said that. My staff gets mad that I'm so mean. And I was like, what would you do? Who would be, and you get scared. I talk about with my girlfriends a lot. Nancy knows some of these people. I have a poker group. One of my members of the poker group ended up in intensive care 2 weeks ago. And the girls were all I'm on open chat GPT. These are the questions to ask the doctor. And people are really worried about they're going to have enough money. It used to be you had the three-legged stool. Many people don't have pensions anymore. And women are more vulnerable and hurt, period, because they are the caregivers. They leave the workforce to take care of children. They're the people that get responsibility. They're in the sandwich generation of young children and parents. If you have a spouse like I did. And, I learned all the crises of, I was lucky. I could afford it. But anybody try to find a caregiver? And remember, all other work is possible when those that you love are taken care of. It's an affordability crisis. It's a being alone, having nobody, being isolated. How long am I going to live? Do I have money to be able to go to the doctor? What happens if I have a long-term health care crisis?
One of the questions I have, I'm going to go to my friend Elizabeth Baker Keffer. Elizabeth was the best boss I ever had. She was at the Atlantic. She helped launch Atlantic Live, and she's the EVP of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce now. But I am interested in the role the private sector is playing or not playing. Are they in this game? Are they derelict? Is there a balance we're all trying to achieve? We're sitting in Washington, so we often look at Washington for answers. And I'm just interested what are alternatives. But I'm going to come back to you in a moment, Debbie. But I'm going to come to Elizabeth to get any perspective.
Thank you, Steve, and I appreciate hearing the panel. And I have a question for the panel as well. But yes, there is a really important role for employers to play in this, and employers are very interested and engaged because of the workforce shortage. So they're really keen to not lose women workers from the workforce, and they're keen to find ways to provide resources for childcare, for adult care, for family leave when needed. Immigration plays a big role in this as well. So the U.S. Chamber has been pushing for a legal immigration program through the White House, and think this might be an opportunity for us to get that done to help to expand the workforce and bring in more workers who are willing to and qualified and skilled at some of these roles. But my question for the panel ties back to talking about, Nancy, the older women voting, being engaged, being active. Are they as active in promoting things like employer-funded care, like immigration reform, like bringing more workers into the system? Are they politically engaged and active beyond voting and trying to change the system and get more resources?
Yeah, I'll start and ask Kristen as well. It really depends. There are a range of issues that the women we engage with a lot are participating on. One is various bills, for example, in the Congress on family caregiving. And we started, I think, 10 years ago, a major effort to pass legislation, beginning first in the states and hopefully someday on Capitol Hill. And when we started, somebody looked across the table. You know these moments in every organization. Somebody looked across the table and said, do you think we'll be able to engage family caregivers? They're so busy. Do they really have time? And we proved pretty quickly that we could. And one day we issued a call for stories, an I Am a Caregiver campaign. We said, tell us your story. And another great example, be careful what you wish for. In 24 hours, we had over 40,000 stories. And so we see particularly older women very focused on this, very focused on Social Security and the economic kind of implications.
And you have a
of
new
that.
report coming out on that?
We do
Sort of
have
pricing what
yeah,
the value of that
actually
care is?
tomorrow we're going to release
Tomorrow?
a report on.
Well, what's the bottom line? Give us it, cheat.
Oh, I can't. I
You
can't give you the
okay.
bottom.
Liz will get down, okay, sorry, Liz. Okay,
There-
great. And you, well,
There are only 50 people at AARP working on that today. We've been able to do it with family caregiving, very much so on Social Security. There is a lot of pressure from older folks in businesses on employers with it. And in most cases, it's been coupled, interestingly, with parents of young children, more so in companies than it has been on Capitol Hill, where we talked about sometimes there's a schism between family caregiving and childcare. But we see a lot of potential there, and important as they vote. I think we looked at that in the midterms.
Yeah, and the only other thing I'd add is that for, in our focus groups, one thing that we consistently hear from women who are 50 plus is that they feel a little bit invisible in some of these conversations, that too often when these political debates come up, all of the heat goes toward, oh, well, what does the manosphere think about this? Because that's the hot voter group that decided the last election. And then like you see these media narratives kind of get latched onto when the reality and the data show that it's women 50 plus who are making the decisions that are driving where this country goes. And yet they feel like they're never the ones that are the voter group that gets the attention, which is what Choose the Difference is all about.
Debbie, would love to get your take on Elizabeth's question as well, but there's also a caregiving task force, which you're a leader of in the House. And I guess I always ask this question. I'm interested in what the decibel level of concern of Congress is on this issue. And is it where it needs to be from your perspective? And what can be done to kick it higher if it needs to be?
No, it's not where it needs to be. And it hasn't been. When this was, okay, I'm probably going to get in total trouble, but
Please.
during Nancy knows this, that when we were doing all the work in the Biden administration, and caregiving was very much an important part of that, and everybody would say to me at the White House, it has Joe Biden, Debbie Dingell, and Bob Casey. How can it not pass? And guess what? The one, I want to use the word F, but I won't, issue that we didn't get over the finish line was this issue. And if you, post-COVID, I talk to small business employers. I talk to big business employers all the time. Elizabeth, you do. One of the biggest problems they have is there is a shortage of employees in certain fields, and women did not return to the workplace because of the caregiving responsibilities they have. Childcare is hard and expensive. Women disproportionately have women disproportionately have both childcare and long-term care or older care. And employers know that if they don't solve this problem, you're seeing employers start childcare on site for parents. It's a huge issue, and it's got to be dealt with. And it's been further aggravated post-COVID by the immigration issue in the last year, where people are being, let's just be honest, how much of our caregivers are people of other countries and cultures who care and know the importance of caring and loving. And for the record, they're also the least paid. They have no benefits. These are the people that we trust with the people we love. They're paid horrific wages. They have no benefits. And when they get sick, they can't afford to go to the doctor. So we have all those issues. We have started a caregiving caucus. I've worked with my colleague, Representative Kiggins from Virginia, on many of these issues. We're also trying to get home and community care two different, different issues. You know, the fact of the matter is everybody says they want to save money. Home care is less expensive to the federal government than institutions are. And we got almost 1 million people on the list right now, and we need to be pushing it that way instead of growing the list and not supporting it. And you don't need to have 24-hour care. You need that helping hand. And and quite frankly, I hate all these words of A or older. Seasoned people sometimes need a helping hand. And I'll be
AASP.
But I'll be in a meeting where caregiving is one of our affordability crises, and everybody talks about childcare. And I yelled at everybody in the room. Some of them are people names well, and said it's caregiving. It's both young and old, and it's a problem for families at all levels across this country.
Debbie, let me ask you one more question. I'm going to bring Rebecca Angelson up as the chief of staff for Senator John Husted, and he is obsessed with this issue as much as any of us are up here. So it's great to have you. We're going to bring you up in a second. I'm interested in, it's probably an unfair question. Does anywhere in the country get it really right? Are there any best and promising practices, models, communities, companies? Is there any model out there that just stands out and said, wow, that's something we ought to be replicating, copying, putting out more? Or is it all dismal?
I'm looking at Nancy because I don't want to get in trouble. And my chief is probably already mad at me.
Yeah.
But there are companies that really they had a shortage of workers, and it was sheer economics that drove them to address the problem.
There are companies, some of them leading the way, and I think trying to learn from one another how best to do it. And then in terms of practices, I can't point to a number of communities that do it the best. Everybody seems to have fragmented services. We have a cooperative program with United Way for 211 in about 20 cities right now, where you can call and get access to services in the city. But it's 20, 30 places right now. The other thing is we've passed about 1,000 bills in the states over the last 12 years on caregiving, whether it's guardianship or a care proposal we had related to hospitals. And when we first started, everybody said, is it just going to be blue states and everything? Oklahoma was the first state to pass it.
Yeah.
Oklahoma and Nebraska are the first two states to have caregiving tax
Right.
credits. It is bipartisan, it's nonpartisan, and we're seeing these things pop up. What we need to do is move much more on the federal level.
So look, I know you've got to run. Your chief is glaring at us both, right? Is that you got another thing? So you've got a next better deal. But just as you go and we bring Rebecca on, I'm really interested in, this is a tough question to ask. We're focused on women over 50 and how important they are in the political equation. Do they know how important they were? Remember the mayor, I don't think she's there anymore, the mayor of Fort Worth that would go out on these bike rides with people?
Yeah.
The reason she would do these bike rides is not only just to get people out going, was to help create, hey, you're powerful. You can make your own weather. You don't have to be just a victim of circumstances. I really admired her. She was very just spunky and amazing when we did the mayor's meeting. But I'm interested in whether there's self-awareness among women of this age about their political power, or are they unconscious of it?
I'm going to start with what Kristen said, how struck we are at how women talk about feeling invisible. And Kristen,
By the way, we are.
Yeah.
It's the truth. People, we maybe had soccer moms at some point that people were paying attention to, but I'm going to get in trouble. I'm already in trouble. But I have
And
screaming.
it's on camera.
Yeah, no. I have screaming matches with people in my own party about we got to stop pitting generations against each other. We're all in this together. Representative government means every generation is at the table. Right. And we support each other. We need to have empathy. We need to have compassion. And we need to understand. And young people think they have it all. They know it all. And you know what? They're going to suddenly be surprised when they find out. For a very long time, Democrats had the edge. Who did you trust to protect your Social Security? We were up by 30%. guess what? These silent women that nobody's paying attention to don't trust anybody.
Kristen, quick comment?
Yes. No, my quick comment is I think that for women 50 plus, they have enormous electoral impact, but they feel at an individual level that they are frequently not heard, that they are not seen in culture, that in their own lives, you know, and I don't want this to be all negative, right? There are positive things we see in our data too. Hope for the future, hope for the next generation. I think if you want to talk about cross-generational things that are good, a lot of women 50 plus are not just worried about, you know, me and who's going to take care of me. I mean, we see throughout the data that they are constantly sacrificing for others, and they care a lot about the next generation, the future for their children, what's going to happen with education in my community. So I think you're right. There is a lot that I think
And
women
they care
50
about
plus
our
care about.
country.
Yes.
You know, when you go to these King rallies, or you go to, I've been to a lot of, I'm going to be nonpartisan here. I've just been to a lot of very public things. The age of the participants at them are not the young people. They remind me of the Vietnam War protests. I've been with, I mean, they're old, seasoned people are going out and making their voices heard because they care about our democracy. They care about their kids. They care about the future of this country. So they are out there trying to make their voices heard.
Big round of applause for Debbie Dingell, Congressman from Michigan. Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'm going to, yes, we can have a passing of the baton. Rebecca Angelson. Rebecca, am I pronouncing Angelson correctly? Thank you so much for being here. Rebecca is Chief of Staff for the Office of Senator John Husted from Ohio. I hope you're having a good time. You're in there. But let me just tell you, I'm going to tell you about Senator Husted's activities. There's S4027, a bill to ban anti-competitive healthcare contracts. That's focused in part on elder care and the elder part of the population. The Delivering for Rural Seniors Act, of which he's a co-sponsor, the Preventing the Deep Fake Scams Act, which is another. I mean, you've got a franchise going. Your office cares about this more. I'm going to get in trouble too, more than many other offices I know. And so, is that all you?
Well, let me first start off by thanking you for having me. Senator Husted wishes he could join. Senator Husted is one of the newest senators that's actually new of today. I can say one of the newest. He was Senator number 100 until the new senator from Oklahoma was sworn in. So we're very excited about that promotion. But from the very beginning of when I started, and I had the honor to join Senator Husted, something that makes my job really easy is that while he is new to the Senate, he is not new to public service. So those of you who don't know who he was in public service for 25 years in Ohio, had positions ranging from lieutenant governor, secretary of state, speaker of the House, and was in both branches of the state legislature. So he is someone who is very solutions oriented and driven. And he took that appetite that he's always had from the state and brought it with him here in his service. One of the very first briefings that the senator and I had when he was sworn in was by the FBI. And they came in and they gave us a rundown about what was going on in Ohio. And top of that list was scammers and fraud. And it was not just numbers on a paper, real life stories about serious ways that, those seasoned individuals were being targeted for, thousands upon dollars, really preying upon those who are most vulnerable. So we took immediate action to see what we could do about that, introduced the Preventing Deep Fake Scams Act, making sure that we're taking care of our seniors should not be a political issue. It's actually an area where we can find a lot of really thoughtful common ground, and it's been a big priority from the senator over the last year.
What are some of the things that I always say the needles that you can move on doing more for seniors? And I just want to be honest. I mean, I talked to Nancy LeaMond for a long time about wanting some sort of caregiver tax credit. Honestly, the caregiver tax credit is pathetically small. Now, they don't have it, but what you're advocating for isn't going to make that much of a difference. It's more of a symbolic gesture in my reading. You may disagree, but it's something, right? It's a toe in the door. But I'm just interested in how when there's tax credits for almost everything else out there, why isn't there a toe in the door on something along those lines, even symbolically?
It's a really great question. I want to point to something that makes that Senator Husted is passionate about. So he was adopted, right? He was born in Michigan. He liked to say he was born in Michigan but made in Ohio. He was adopted by a family in the upper northwest part of the state, very rural. And he views the fact that he's had a career that he never expected. He wanted to play football, and here he is in the United States Senate. When we were looking through and working to pass the working families tax cut, we were looking to see what can we do that will really meaningfully help people, especially as we're looking at this affordability challenge that everyone is facing, particularly women, right? And one of the things that he was outspoken about was the adoption tax credit. So he was able to uniquely use his story and his perspective to provide a voice. Senator Husted is married. He has 2 daughters, 18. He has 3 kids, but 2 of them are daughters, 18 and 16 years old. He has a granddaughter. His chief of staff is a woman. His scheduler is a woman. His administrative director is a woman. His legislative director is a woman. To say that John Husted is pro-women is a pretty easy thing for me to say. I'm really proud of that. And I think there's a conversation to be had. And recently he engaged in that conversation. We're continuing to do so with Kellyanne Conway on some of the efforts that they're doing through Engage to see, this caregiving conversation and challenge. How can we move the needle? So those are ongoing conversations and something that Senator Husted plans to be engaged in.
Ask Kristen if she's got a question for you, given your research. I'd love to connect the research that you're doing. I don't know if you know Kristen Soltis Anderson. She's kind of the hot stuff in polling. And I should mention, whereas Kristen is on one side of the equation, Maggie O'Mara is another. We've done things together, basically kind of looking at the whole spectrum of opportunities out there. But would love to give you a chance to pose a question. And I just want to say, Victoria Spartz has just arrived. Victoria, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for being here. We'll bring you up in just a second. But can we get, you want a latte or a coffee or a espresso martini or an ice cream sundae with a brownie in it? Okay, this is great. Well, anything you want, you got, okay? Nahara can make sure we take care of the Congresswoman. But over to you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we found in our survey was that for many women, especially those who are sort of 50 to 64, one of the things that they're really concerned about is the ability to save for retirement. Congresswoman Dingell had like all of the numbers from our poll memorized, like better than I did. That was amazing. But that a very significant number of them, are planning to really rely just on Social Security in retirement. So tell me a little bit about what you are seeing on the Hill, or things, whether it's working families tax cut, et cetera, that are going to make it easier for women who fall in that sort of 50 to 64 range. They may be working, they're trying to hold it together. What are the things that are going to help them to set aside some more money and feel more financially secure about their futures?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I'm trying to decide which direction to take this in, because I feel like there are a few ways that we could talk about this. I'm going to bring it back to some work that Senator Husted is focused on. I think that we need to find ways to support people as they, to earn more and keep more of what they earn. So how can we do that? It depends on what, income level we're looking at, but overall, a huge problem in this country that my boss is very passionate about is something called the benefits cliff. I know we're all really familiar with that on the panel, but what is happening right now is a great example. You have a working mom who is, a single working mom. Let's say she's making $33,000 in the state of Ohio. She has 2 kids. She is offered the opportunity to have a raise up to $34,000, and right now she'd be losing almost $5,000 if she accepts that raise. My boss believes that that is the federal government's way of trapping people in poverty. We're not allowing them to say yes to opportunity because they make a very logical decision to keep more of what they earn. So how do we fix that? He has a solution that we've offered that we believe is the most compassionate solution. We believe it should be bipartisan, called the Upward Mobility Act, that would allow states to keep funding exactly as it is, phase that out, and help people say yes to opportunity. That's one way.
Let me ask you one more quick question. I'm going to do this to set up Victoria Spartz. I should also say, Gwen Morris, Congresswoman Morris, great to see you. I was just in Austin. This is like a humble brag. I did go to South by Southwest. in Austin. We did a big thing on healthcare, and we had the chairman, the Republican chairman in the Texas State House of the, I think it's the Public Health Committee. He's from Texarkana, and he said one of the biggest stress points out there are hospitals, hospital care, and the rural-urban divide. And he's got to say, you know, we can't just leave people that are in rural America with nothing. And he says the way things are going, from their perspective, it's one of the biggest challenges. I was so interested to see that Senator Husted has the Delivering for Rural Seniors Act. And I want our audience to know the topography of that. How do we navigate that divide on resources? I know it's not all a government problem to fix, but are there things that we can do by way of health and care to address that divide? Because this is a country where half the country is, you know, in rural population, the other half in cities, and they don't live in the same gravitational fields.
Yeah, so Ohio is very rural, so this is something that we are constantly thinking about, and I think we have a lot more work to do in this space. But the reason why he introduced the Delivering for Rural Seniors Act is because folks who live in rural communities, especially older individuals who live in rural communities, have a harder time with transportation, harder time accessing the things that they need, and this is just one solution that will help bridge that gap. There are a couple other things out there that we're working on, but we can't be leaving folks behind who live in rural communities. Senator Husted grew up on a road called County Road J, so it didn't even have a name. It says rural as it can get. And so that's a group of folks outside of just older individuals, but especially older individuals who live in rural areas.
I had a lot of county room J's in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, where my family's from, so I get that. But let's give a big round of applause to Rebecca Angelson, Chief of Staff for Senator John Husted. Thank you so much for coming. Now I'm going to invite my friend Victoria up, and Gwen, you'll give us a few minutes. Are you okay? Okay. Well, then I want you guys to Victoria, here you are. Come on up. Okay.
Very healthy bipartisan debate.
LeaMond? Do you know Nancy LeaMond?
Hi.
And Kristen Soltis Anderson, one of the great pollsters of America. Congressman Spartz, sit down here. So this is terrific. We have Victoria Spartz. She's from Indiana. She's on the Joint Economic Committee, and I just want to, kind of talk for a moment about the Joint Economic Committee, which you may find strange enough. I love that committee. When I was in the Senate in the 1990s, I'd been the head of the Nixon Center, and then I went to work for Senate Democrat Jeff Bingaman, and he was on the Joint Economic Committee. And it was like one of the only committees that actually had time to spend time thinking about what economists had to say, how to get things right, what did Adam Smith really say, where was Hamilton, all those kinds of things. So I loved the think tank nature of the Joint Economic Committee, and I lamented that other committees weren't as smart. So let me just start out. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us. Look, you know what we're talking about, which is how to change the point of equilibrium in not only looking at women over 50 and where they, the needs they have, but also the power that they have, kind of being an overlooked group. But I'd love to get your perspective on how we should think about that.
Well, thank you. We actually had a great hearing today, and AARP was involved a lot dealing with defrauding with so many, not just seniors. I mean, we had seniors. I think it was interesting. I had some credit union people visiting my office, and they had people getting defrauded, a lot of demanding to take money to send overseas, so pay some taxes. And I said, do you see a lot of older people? They said, no, a lot of actually people in their 50s. I'm like, interesting, so it's really, it's become
AI is also changing the terrain.
It's sophisticated. It's becoming more and more difficult to deal with that. And we don't really even have proper policies or agency to really dedicate it. And we as Congress people get so many requests from our constituents, and we really don't have any agency to deal with. So it was an interesting discussion, just kind of go back today, and we were talking about, how important it is. But just go back to what you said. There is, I'm a CPA. I did accounting for a living. No one wants to understand the numbers here. So I was actually citing in the committee, Government Accountability Office gave Congress and President 2 days a report, which I'm sure is that very few members of Congress ever read. But few numbers in that report. So we have $6 trillion in assets and $136 trillion in liabilities. With this type of a balance sheet, if any household, or any business would have, you would definitely know that you're in deep trouble. And majority of that trouble,
And bankruptcy is not an option.
well, and but we are insolvent. This is the reality, and it's not going to get better. Inflation and all this spending is just going to create more and more, and interest cost is going to consume more and more. We have funds like Social Security fund going insolvent in 32, which is it could be devastating for a lot of seniors, and we cannot just always, have this crisis wait last second and actually not do real reforms before crisis
and
happens.
in this report, they talked about just, that so many women already believe that if they get Social Security, that it's not enough. Like they don't have enough to navigate
Of course.
their latter
It
years.
is not, but that's why you kind of go back. But what is driving all of this spending? Federal spending, family spending, what is really, really driving all of this perverse incentives in our economy? It's healthcare. We spend more than any developed country per person in the world and have some of the worst outcomes in any developed country. I mean, we're going bankrupt. 1 of 6 families, individuals in America are insolvent because of healthcare. States going insolvent. Federal government is insolvent. Businesses no one can afford it, whether you're in rural or not rural area. But we have lots of Taj Mahals,
But what's the answer?
billions on Wall Street, and we have, a lot of oligopolies heavily subsidized by government. If you look at any hospitals and insurance now, 50 up to 100, on average, 75% of their funding now come from the government. 75, and they're not private entities. They're heavily overbilling Medicare. They're heavily overbilling Medicaid. They become the consolidated buy now doctors, charge crazy fees and put them in non-competes. And we have a huge oligopolies controlling with cartel behaviors, controlling every sector of healthcare market. So their price is outrageous. And I know that there is a lot of politics and happen in Congress, but I said, okay, maybe at least we can agree on one issue, it's price transparency. I'm actually glad that President mentioned that during his State of the Union.
Do you and Gwen Moore
and I've seen, I thought at least people need to know how they get screwed. So actually some Democrats got up too. So well, not too many moments during State of the Union when Democrats would get up with Republicans. Not all Republicans got up or Democrats. It was kind of interesting. But I hope when people understand, we'll have a little bit more. So at least we need to start understanding what outrageous we have price of healthcare. But then we start looking how we can increase supplies of doctors to have better access, why physicians are owned by hospital, but by law they cannot own hospitals, why we have residence programs that cannot, even if there are some abuses, they cannot even sue hospitals because Congress put exemptions, why we subsidize and overbilling and allow hospitals to bill in fees, why we create market where insurance companies are able to control big parts of the market by doctors' PBMs and pretty much do whatever they want, shuffle in their profits and have enormous amount of profits funded by government. I mean, it's truly just the system became corrupt. And going back to women, most women, no matter which age, usually take care of all healthcare problems for their families. No matter, like I have 2 kids, my husband a kid, but if something wrong, okay, your kids need something. okay. Hey, your kid, I'm like, okay, my gosh, did you go do your dental appointment? Like, if I don't remember that, he's not going to remember that, right? You have aging parents.
So you're a member of Congress and the caregiver.
Well, of course, you love as a mother, no matter what, right? You have grandparents. You have your parents, that aging, as a mother, I was talking to my hairdresser recently, and her mom has some memory problems, and she's now had to put her some, nursing home. It costs her $11,000 a month. $11,000 a month. That's a lot of money, So if healthcare consuming so much now, more than mortgages, it consuming more of disposable income than anything else, more than taxes or anything else, you have less and less to be able to do more things. So that has to be fixed.
So Victoria, let me ask you a question, and we'd love to give Nancy a chance to pose a question to you too. But what is the literacy of your colleagues on this?
Well, the challenge is healthcare. We made it so complicated that most of my colleagues, they understand the problems, but they hear so much propaganda from a lot of, it's the biggest lobby in Washington, D.C., by far bigger than defense. They spend 7 times more to do propaganda and control Washington, D.C. And, and if you give me $1 trillion, they can buy a lot of lobby too, But so they listen to a lot of that, and they intimidate, legislators, oh, we're going to run ads or we're going to close hospitals, intimidate. So a lot of people, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with that. But I think the system is blown up, and everyone needs to understand that, like, we are going to have a calamity coming and we'll have to do something. So I think more of my colleagues, starting waking up. Unfortunately, it's become such a partisan issue, and some of the solutions need to be bipartisan. So I try to find at least a little bit of common ground on a small, level to try to move forward.
Nancy?
I was just going to ask you, in what area, you talked about a lot of very challenging issues. What area do you think is the most likely where people can come together across the aisle and pass something that will contribute in some small way, maybe, to fixing some of the real problems you identified?
Well, that's why I thought, there is some bipartisan legislation in both chambers related to healthcare price transparency.
Yeah.
And we need to go. President did executive order. I don't think the rules went far enough, so I think it needs to go further, and they're willing to work with committee. And I think that's one of the issues that I feel maybe, we can find common ground and at least start there, and then start reforming providing insurance market. They need real reforms. But I think if people will see how bad things are, because even a lot of employees, they don't even know how they get scammed by insurance companies and on all these transactions and what they charge their accounts versus what the bill. It is insanity. Like, I've been in audit. If somebody would doing such things in any private company, the executives would be in jail. What insurance and hospital are doing in the real world, you'd be in jail. They're cooking the books, lying, defrauding the federal government, but also Americans. And if we don't have healthy society, we're in a deep trouble.
Let me get one quick question here, and then I'm going to bring Congresswoman Gwen Moore up.
Hi, thank you for being here this evening. I am Noreen Heckmanzik. I'm a federal employee. I also agree I'm seasoned. Well, it's all right. I'm speaking in my own capacity and not of the federal government. But I've worked for 6 presidents, 7 administrations. I love serving our country. There's so much good that we can do on a bipartisan basis. I am old enough to remember going to Capitol Hill. I was on the team that modernized our food supply, so it's based on science. And at that time, we'd have courtesy visits. And I'd go and take my principal up to meet with Republicans and Democrats. This was during the Clinton and Bush administrations. Congress, men and women used to talk to one another, right? They used to have subcommittee hearings and committee hearings, and things moved a little bit slower. We didn't have omnibus and cromnibus. So when you ask about why aren't women my age paying attention, I pay attention to this because I live here, right? But I'm from Pennsylvania. My husband's from Ohio. People are just struggling on all of the issues that you're talking about, and Kristen, that you're polling about. So I guess I'd love to say, can we please stop talking? And can we get members of Congress from both parties to pilot a new idea and get their friends to go with them to talk about incentivize? I was in Rome for Christmas. You don't see a lot of old people in nursing homes. They're not. They're walking up and down steps. They're active. They're getting their cappuccino. They're healthy. They're with their families. It's multi-generational living. So to your point, $11,000, that's expensive. Can we incentivize the grandson to give the grandparent the medication? Can we be creative, pilot these ideas, and then storytelling? Can we tell the stories so that we can create some momentum and have women my age believe that change is possible?
No, I agree with you. Actually, my Democrat colleagues are much better at storytelling. So how I need the help on that? I'm good at numbers, but I should have got a degree in theater. I said, there is no political science. It's all drama and theater. So I should have got a degree in science, but then it's in accounting, but I agree with you. And I think we need to do some. And I think, to your point, we are not, it's all from one election to another. So I said, okay, let's just pick at least one issue and work and move it forward. Maybe not in a perfect way. It's a legislative branch, but truly work on policy, because Americans need it from us. That's why I think Congress has 11% approval rating, unfortunately. Yeah. But we need to demand people deliver results, and results will require collaboration and require some policy making, and require some kind of solutions. But no one realized that everyone bombarded, we're bombarding the bases, get everyone this, there is a time for that, but at least let's govern for a little bit, not like the day one after the election, we start again campaigning. I think this place is so broken. The processes are broken. There is no regular order. Congressional Budget Act is not followed. That's why sometimes I even give my own party hard time because
Right.
I'm responsible for it more than for other side.
Can you hang out for a few minutes with us? Are you sure you want to hear what Gwen Moore has got to say? Gwen, come on up, come on up, come on up to the show. This is the AARP, Nancy LeaMond, Steve Clemens show. No, why don't you just join us right here? And I'm going to share mics with Kristen and Nancy here. Gwen, thank you so much. Of course. No, it's great. I like to walk around. Of course, Gwen Moore is also a member of my favorite committee, the Joint Economic Committee. The think tank of Congress, the smartest committee in Congress. And she is, of course, from Wisconsin, and it's a real honor to have you here with us. And thank you for joining the stage with this great group of ladies. Let me just ask you, as you know, we're trying to think about it. We're not doing this program here just to get espresso martinis. Yeah, I mean, I hope you guys are working on mine and lattes and all of this sort. We're kind of interested in how you move the equilibrium on understanding. I mean, I love this topic. Nancy LeaMond and I have done so much together because women over 50 are the most dependable voters in America. They say they're going to vote, and they vote. Now, I don't know if they recognize in the aggregate how much power they have, but they are engaged. But I also feel, candidly, they're demeaned and overlooked and taken for granted. Would love to get your take.
Well, as a woman over 50, let me just say I really appreciate being here, and it's always good to be here with you, Nancy, and with my colleague Victoria Spartz. I'm also on the Ways and Means Committee, and I'm on the subcommittee for Social Security. And I was very interested in coming here to talk about some of the views that women over 50 had in their sense of security or insecurity. And women feel much more insecure than men do about their future than men do. And
do you feel like it's getting worse?
Well, I don't know if it's worse or if it's just the same. Women have always had lower incomes than men, and they rely on sometimes Social Security, particularly African-American women. It's their only source of income. They've had jobs working in the pink collar sector where they have not had access to 401ks and pension funds. And so they don't have a lot of retirement security. And Social Security is the only thing that they have. And they tend to live longer than men. I guess that's a benefit. But that also means that their primary source of income also has left them. So I would say that this conversation is very apropos right now to talk about women over 50 who rely primarily on Social Security.
Victoria just said something very interesting that's kind of rolling on my mind, where she really wants to roll a bowling ball into the incumbent power structures that I'm paraphrasing what you said, that are essentially ripping off the community. And I'm interested in whether some of your Democrats and you yourself see that same problem of incumbent institutions, enormously powerful, that aren't delivering to Americans in the way they should.
Do you mean insurance companies? Do you mean
You name
our healthcare system in general? Well, there are particular things that I am disturbed about. I'm disturbed about the sort of vertical integration in the healthcare system, which I think inures tremendous profits to insurance companies beyond the pale. Where an insurance company can also buy a clinic and also can buy a laboratory. But that being said, I think I think healthcare is extremely important to provide to American citizens. I think that we can do a whole lot with regard to streamlining the way healthcare is delivered. I think that our Affordable Care Act, for example, it really needs to be adopted and it needs to be changed so that, number one, we look at the compensation of some of the insurance companies. And again, like this vertical integration, I think is a real problem. My colleague, Representative Sparks, talked about the economy just in terms of our liabilities, but not talking about it in terms of our assets. I think one of the problems that we've had is that we are just looking at our deficits and we're not investing enough in our people. As you mentioned earlier, Representative Sparks and I are both on the Joint Economic Committee, and I missed today.
No, we had a great conversation.
I heard it was great and it was on topic on
Yeah.
fraud.
It was right.
Yeah.
But at the previous meeting that we had, we also talked about investing $5 per elderly person and only $1 toward our children. That will come back to bite us in the behind. I think that when we don't, only 5% of our population, of the world's population, lives in the United States, and we are leaving talent on the table by, birth through 3 is where it's at. And if we decide that we're just too poor to invest in our children, it's going to cost us at the long end of things. After all of us boomers here, Nancy and I, after all of us are gone, and we are trying to create more revenues in order to dial down this deficit. As we try to do that, we're going to have to look toward people who are inventing things, creating that finance, and we're not going to have that because we're not educating our kids. That's number one. We have a tremendous a problem with taxes not being paid, revenues not being paid. We have multi-billionaires that don't pay their fair share of taxes. And what we did is we invested $86 billion with a B in computer upgrades, in terms of personnel, in terms of things like forensic accountants, the Victoria Sparkses of the world, to look at ways to close that tax gap. That tax gap is huge. It's billions of dollars a year. That could definitely help us.
Are you the most famous CPA in Congress?
Well, I'm one of the very few. So there is not too much competition over there. So.
Go ahead.
And so we need to close the tax gap. We need to invest in our kids. We need to do something with healthcare so that we're not,
right.
that we have government subsidies, but that we don't allow the insurance to have this vertical integration.
Victoria?
Can I just add something, why talking about the numbers? Because you have, and we need to spend resources wisely. And I agree, we need to invest in things what we need. But I'll give you an example. When I was state senator a few years ago, I did a calculation of my agency, Department of Child Services. And I said, how we spent, the simple calculation, total spend, and pretty much 100% federally funded for the state of Indiana. Total spend and divided by the number of children we serve. We were spending $50,000 per child per year. I'm like, where does the money go?
Right.
5 to 10,000 goes to foster family. Where is the rest? For 50 grand, we can send things to Harvard Business School. It goes to some healthcare services. I'm like, what services? I want to be in business of that. That seems like a good business. So we spend an enormous amount of money, but they not go to the right places. So, there is so much money you can have, and we need to invest in things that are going to benefit future. We need to invest in people, provide us better services, and help people to lift people up. But if we're going to continue spending more and more money and make more and more rich, people around them that provide the services and it doesn't get to the people, we bankrupt the country. So we have to start looking at this number. So I think we agree on reform in the Affordable Care Act, so we might have more in common. But we need to look at some reforms, but we need to start looking how we're spending our money because we spend outrageous amount of money.
Well, I agree with her. The very young lady there who talked about spending her time overseas and watching the octogenarians walk up and down the hills and so on. We can't get the Congressional Budget Office to score preventive care. I know so many African American women who died 2 weeks after they showed up at the emergency room with breast cancer. And I was like, is there some sort of genetic something another about Black women? No, it's because we don't get enough preventive care. One thing is a lot of women have, for example, dense breast tissue. And it doesn't mean that you're fat. It just means you have dense breast tissue. A lot of Black women have dense breast tissue. And in Wisconsin, I have to give it to them, just a week ago, they passed a bill to force insurance companies to test women with dense breast tissue. You know, here, if you go get a mammogram, I've got dense breast tissue. I'll be 75, God willing, I live till April 18th. I have never failed a mammogram. Never, ever, ever. But the truth is, you cannot see past that dense breast tissue.
Yeah.
And if you go in and they say you're good to go,
Right.
You know, after your $50 mammogram, how much is it going to cost when you need chemo and radiation and you die young and you leave your 2 kids for the state to have to pay for their care? We're not doing it. We don't want, people will not go to the doctor in order to incur debt. And we need the CBO and others to score prevention. You know, those people who are walking up and down the steps when they're 80, you know, they're incentivized by healthcare.
Your Ways
systems.
and Means and joint economic, which means you've
Hey,
got power.
I ain't playing.
Well, let me just say we're right near the end. I want to get us back to our, having some fun here, but I'm going to use here and go back to our friend's question. Tell us your first name again. Noreen's really great question. It just made me think, and as Victoria was saying, I just think the status quo has gotten us where we are. And what we see in the She is the Different survey, which I highly recommend people take a look at. It is on the AARP website. We continue to have these discussions to both update what Kristen, Soltis, Anderson, and Maggie O'Mara are finding as they talk to Americans about what their priorities are. We're going in the midterm elections. But I'm really interested in getting back to what here. Are there ways that you see of shattering the biases that we have that are dealing with some of the stigma that is part of it? I just want to put that on the table. There's stigma in a lot of this conversation. Also, as you began talking about some of the incumbent power groups that are out there, the oligopolies and whatnot, I'm just interested in each of your takes. And I'm going to start with Nancy, and we'll go down real quick, maybe a minute each, maybe a minute and a half.
Well, I think what continues to strike us in the polling we've done is the tremendous feelings of older women about their economic challenges. And we've talked a lot about caregiving today, but it's the cost of groceries, it's the cost of every prescription drugs, an issue we work on quite a bit. And I think Kristen speaks next, but it's constant. We've been doing this polling for a number of years. It hasn't really changed. And, I just hope we can find some areas where we can help push to have some concrete action in the Congress. And a quick aside, one of our people testified at a fraud hearing you did this afternoon. And we had 25 we have a strike force of volunteers, and they were so excited to go. And one of them came back and said a number of the members spend time with them. And I thank you for that, because these are people that wake up every single day and help us try to convey, people talked about stories, try to convey the real life challenges of older women. So thank you for that.
Yeah, in our data, we find that women 50 plus are giving a lot. They're helping to take care of their adult children. They're taking care of their aging parents. 38% in our survey said that they have skipped medical care because of the cost. I mean, they are making sacrifices of their own constantly. And then when we ask the questions about like, who's going to be there for you? Do you think you're going to have a good retirement? Who's going to take care of you if you need help? The answer is a little bit, well, we'll see. And I think that is just a call to action for everyone to help make sure that women 50 plus don't have to wonder about those answers, that somebody is going to be there for them.
Well, Kristen, I've tested this out. I've shouted for a cup of coffee from my bedroom and nobody answers. I hate to keep picking on you, okay, but you made the point about, somebody made the point, or maybe you did, about $11,000 a month for nursing homes. Well, here's one of the old institutions. I remember Wisconsin, once upon a time, had the highest rate of nursing home admittance in the nation. And it is definitely, it's the first cut of any Medicaid funding that you're even thinking about is that nursing home. You talk about, could the grandson come and help out? We have $1 trillion a year of uncompensated care, minimally. And that's a modest amount of grandsons and daughters and daughter-in-laws that are trying desperately before they put people in nursing homes to take care of their families. But of course, they got to go to work too. They have younger kids at home. So one of the bills that I've been working on is called the Worker Act. And what it would do, there are so many people who aren't eligible for Medicaid because their incomes are too high, even though they're modest. And so they're not eligible for Medicaid care in the homes. And those are the people who end up in the nursing home because they can't get care in the home. What we're proposing is that we don't deem people's income like Social Security or like their federal retirement monies, deem that to the person who needs the care, so that the earned income tax credit could go to those caretakers to at least offset some of the out-of-pocket expenses that they're making, to take care of their parents. Maybe you got somebody to watch them a couple of hours until you get off work. Somebody to help their mom take a bath in the morning, so that they're not late for work. This, when you talk about $1 trillion a year of non-compensated care, we're taking productivity, again, out of our economy by not paying people to do that. I also have a Social Security bill, which would provide more money to especially women who tend to live longer for when they turn 85 or 20 years after they've received their first Social Security. They need that income. I mean, somebody 85 is in Wisconsin, I better not catch them out there shoveling their snow or cutting their grass or climbing up on the roof to fix a leak. They can't do it. They need Instacart to come to their home. I just had a story this weekend of one of my friends who had an aneurysm out there at the grocery store and held up the exit to the store because she couldn't walk. And recognizing the caregiving needs to women and people who have gone beyond that. And my Social Security bill would extend the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund, something that we have got to hold hands on as Democrats and Republicans and fix, because we do not, Social Security is not one of those things we don't give up on.
And Gwen, that's been introduced, your bill?
My bill has been introduced. Yes, it has. And it's a bill that would increase the solvency. It would also restore the benefit to people to go to post-secondary education, again, to increase our productivity. I mean, we all know it. The data are in. You need more than a high school diploma in order to get a job these days, not necessarily college, but at least some training in advanced manufacturing or whatever, AI or whatever comes along, to be able to do that. And also, what it would do is we would ask people to pay just a little. Okay, I see that watch. Maybe $7 a week increase in payroll taxes.
Not looking for you. I'm just waiting for my espresso martini.
That's it. Payroll taxes. And I'm just thinking of the $6,000, up to $6,000 that we have provided on a one-time only basis to seniors, $95 billion that we could have put into the trust fund to put a plug in it.
Well, one of the things we've done, I'm going to finish with Victoria here, but one of the things we've talked about at other of our coffee house discussions is, disrupting education and lifelong education and what needs to do that, and how that's another area where you can move the needle and bring it. I mean, this is going back to Nancy's comment. If the future of retirement is work, then make it easy for people to continue to be part of that workforce. But
if the data are in.
Yeah.
Birth through 3 is where it's at. And public funded education, where there's choice schools, or charter schools, it doesn't start till you're 6 years old.
Right.
And by that time, sometimes kids are DOA. You shouldn't be 6 years old just learning your ABCs,
right,
or just learning your letters or your numbers. And if you don't have any, and as a great grandmother, I have spent a fortune on preschool things for my great grandkids because I couldn't wait for them to get admitted.
Hope
into
they're
school.
grateful. Hope they're expressing their gratitude.
Well, I tell you, I had one. I gave her a scooter. I gave her a blanket. I gave her some books. I gave her subscription to the high. And she asked me where were the rest of her gifts. So you never know.
That's part of the game. Victoria, I'm going to give you the final word.
Yeah, and then just want to kind of on the positive note, we actually agree on a lot more. We need to fix education, and states really need to do a better job. They all say we want to have control, but they're all not doing anything. So states have to be pushed to do a better job, but we have to fix education. And college education too, it's crazy. I mean, some of these kids graduate with so much debt that they will be enslaved to pay the debt all their life, right? I agree. We have to fix Social Security. We have to balance the fund. We have to keep promises to seniors. We cannot just do so. And we tried to do fiscal bipartisan commission. Didn't happen. Hopefully it will happen because it has to be resolved on bipartisan basis. And we need to be serious and be legislative. I agree with you that we have to go to value-based healthcare where we have better outcomes and have prevention and diagnostic. But we also need to look at all of these cartels, healthcare cartels, now screwing all of us. And I'll give you a small example. It was complete lack of competition with subsidizing them. It's crazy. I was actually just recently myself, I don't go very often to hospital, and barely, I should do better, but just do my checkups. So I did my checkup, and doctor suggested to do some diagnostic procedures for me. So I showed up to hospitals, and I'm like, they're like acting like I'm going to do some major surgery or something. I'm like, what did you do it? What kind of procedure do it? And then it's just a minor procedure, 15 minutes. But I just asked him right away, he acted so strange. I said, how much is going to cost me? And he's like, $15,000. I'm like, what? I'm like, no way in hell I'm going to pay that much money. I turned around and left. And then I told my mom, and she says, Victoria, in private hospital in Ukraine, it's $130. I said, well, I can fly business class. But it is outrageous. It is crazy. So a lot of people, and they don't really need it, but what if you really do need it, right? A lot of people, cannot afford to do some really services we need. So we have to stop that more competition for value, more supply, and look at the prices of healthcare. Our prices are outrageous compared to any other country in the world. And I think that's why we at least can start with the bipartisan price transparency. Maybe we'll force then us as legislators start working on real reforms because we have to reform all these markets. But thank you for having us.
Well, thank you. I mean, I just want to say real quick before we thank our speakers, Victoria Spartz, Gwen Moore, Kristen Soltis Anderson, also Representative Debbie Dingell, Rebecca Angelson, who's Chief of Staff for Senator John Husted, and of course, Nancy LeaMond. I'm actually going to give Nancy the last word in a moment. The reason we do this is kind of I wish we could do that. You can do it like when we're having the martinis. We can all talk. This is a night meant to provoke. It's meant to offer provocations from people about where we're at right now is a point of concern. I love Kristen's surveys that she's doing because it's a 5-alarm fire out for many people who don't see that they have a path through the economics of these times. And I really want to thank Nancy LeaMond for trusting us to bring together a number of people. You're all here because we look at you as influencers, and we hope you will take these provocations and talk about this. Talk about it amongst yourselves here this evening, but with many others. Some of you are writers, some of you are bloggers, some of you run associations, Shayla and others. This ought to be on everybody's radar screen. And so I want to turn this over to Nancy. First of all, thank you for the brownies and lattes and the great conversation. But Nancy LeaMond, you close us out.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Stephen, to everybody who joined this evening. And thank you all for being here. And I hope you'll go and find the She's the Difference poll. in addition to a number of things Kristen and Margie O'Meara have written about. And importantly, that you'll, when you have lots of opportunities to talk about important issues and items on the agenda, that you'll think a little bit about older women. So thank you for being here, and come again.